Hi there and welcome to Take the Blast. We are a YouTube channel dedicated to the Twin Suns format in Star Wars Unlimited, and because you're watching this, well, clearly you want a taste of Twin Suns and just need a wise master to show you the ropes. I'm going to cover how to play Twin Suns, and I'm also going to cover just about everything that you need to know, whether you are a total beginner who hasn't even played Star Wars Unlimited before, or if you're someone who has played Premier or other standard formats and you're just a bit interested in the Twin Suns format, as well as explaining any new gameplay changes that Set 4 Jump to Lightspeed is going to bring in 2025. But let's kick it off by getting an understanding on what Star Wars Unlimited's Twin Suns format actually is. Well, this is a singleton multiplayer format with some additional rule tweaks and setup changes when compared to other formats that make for some really interesting deck building decisions, as well as introducing a lot more politicking than you'd be used to in head-to-head matches. Now, the most typical setup, and it's the way that we play it on our channel, involves 4 players, each with their own decks, as well as a pair of leaders with matching heroism or villainy aspects, plus a base of their choice. Players will then take it in turns, choosing actions, going clockwise around the table, all competing against each other to decide a clear victor where possible by dealing damage to each other's base and reducing each other to 0 base health. Now, everything you understand about the general rules and laws of Star Wars Unlimited exist in Twin Suns, so if you do already have a good grasp on the quick start rules, well, you're in a pretty good place. But we will flash up on screen anytime that there's a significant rule change or difference, so you know to pay attention to the important bits. And I'm also not going to cover every single rule in depth in this video because that would take way too long, but if you did have some quirky rules-based questions or odd card interactions that you wanted to get some input on, drop them in the comments and we'll give you our take on it. I'm a level 1 judge, so hopefully I know what I'm on about. For now though, let's take a look at what each player of a Twin Suns game needs. As I briefly mentioned before, players will need their own deck, complete with 2 leaders and a base. Your leaders of choice must be unique to each other and must also share matching villainy or heroism aspect pips. The 2 leaders are then paired with the base of your choice. For example, you could pair Leia Organa Alliance General, a heroism command leader, with Luke Skywalker Hero of Yavin, a heroism aggression leader. Or you could pair Admiral Piet commanding the Armada, who is a villainy command, with Cad Bane, he who needs no introduction, a villainy cunning leader. But you couldn't pair Nala Se Clone Engineer with Boba Fett Daimyo because they don't share matching villainy or heroism pips. They just clash. For this video, I've brought along Boba Fett and Chewbacca, who pair very, very naughtily together. I would recommend it. I'll put the deck list down below as well. Yeah. As for the main deck, well, the rules are pretty straightforward. Your deck must include at least 80 cards, but there is no upper limit. Your deck, though, must also be singleton, meaning that you cannot have more than 1 copy of the same card in your deck. The deck should also not include any token cards, such as shields, experience, or token units like clones or X-Wings. Stuff like that. Those are actually separate pieces of the game and are generated by game effects rather than actually played from your hand. Some cards in Star Wars Unlimited do share the same name but feature different card anatomy, such as these differing versions of the Millennium Falcon. Because these cards are different in that they have different attack power, health, sometimes color aspects, even text boxes, you can have each one in your Twin Suns deck, despite them all having the same name. So long as there is at least 1 difference between cards of the same name, they count as unique cards for Twin Suns deck building rules, except artist credits. That doesn't count. So if one artist drew the same card twice or once, you couldn't use both of those. As a general rule of thumb for building your deck, you'll likely want to play within the aspects of the 2 leaders and bases that you've chosen. And the reason for this is that any card that you play that doesn't feature an aspect covered by your base or leaders will incur a 2 resource penalty for each missing aspect pip. So a card like Ruthless Raider would actually cost 8 for this deck to play because I'm missing the villainy pip. And a card like the Millennium Falcon would cost me 5 to play because I'm missing the cunning pip. Also, cards like Vigilance, which feature 2 Vigilance aspect pips, or blue pips, would still cost this deck 6. Even though I do have Vigilance here, I need 2 of them to play it at that 4 cost. So remember that. Some other extras that your table is going to need is a way to track the damage on your base and units, such as counters or die or anything else really that's going to be suitable. Here's what I like to use. Loads of numbers. This is for like general effects. These are for experience. I have some extras here for my token units. Whatever makes sense to you and the rest of your table will be perfectly acceptable. In general though, it is pretty handy to have some D6 or D20 just set aside if you ever need to randomize something or just to have because they're quite fun to play with. But typically we use an app, so that's also totally fine if you've got a phone. You've got a phone. Yeah, you probably got a phone. But you are also going to need something to represent the 3 tokens of Twin Suns. We've got the initiative token, which you might remember from the main game, the blast token, that's us, and then the plan token. Now, we'll move on to what all of those mean, but for now, why don't we just set up an actual game of Twin Suns. All right, so you got your players, you got your decks, you're all ready to start up your very first game of Twin Suns. I'm very excited for you. But the first thing to do is actually figure out which player is starting with the initiative token. Any method works absolutely fine. I mean, you could literally just choose someone if you like, but most pods will tend to roll dice to see who gets the highest number, and then that player takes the initiative token. Whatever way you do it, the very next step is for players to shuffle their decks, put their base and leaders into the base zone, and then draw an opening hand of 6 cards. Easy. At this point, you're going to choose 2 of these cards to place face down as your resources, and then ready them. If your hand doesn't look too desirable, maybe not enough 1 or 2 drops, you can actually mulligan once to look for a better opening hand. So do exactly the same thing again. Shuffle it up, draw 6 cards, and make sure you resource 2 of them. You have to resource 2. That's non-negotiable. I think we'll get rid of these. So once all players are happy with their resourced cards, or they've mulliganed once, the player with that initiative token begins by taking an action. And what are those actions? Well, typically a player will have one of 4 actions to choose from. They can play a card from their hand, attack with a unit, use an action, or take an available token. Once they've done so, it moves over to the next player going clockwise. And again, not going to run through every possibility, rule, interaction for the time being, so hopefully you already understand the quick start rules at a minimum. But one big thing to remember is that in Twin Suns, players cannot pass their turn if there is still a token unclaimed. To play a card, you must declare your intentions, check that there aren't any restrictions preventing you from playing the card you want, and then pay the cost of the card, which in most cases is as simple as exhausting the number of resources the card costs in its upper left corner. After that's completed, the card is considered played, and it's placed in its respective zone. For units, that'll either be ground or space, and they'll always enter play exhausted, which is this orientation, unless otherwise specified, and you can signify that just by turning the card 90 degrees. For events, they actually go directly into your discard pile before resolving their effects. Upgrades get attached to the unit that you wish to play them on, and so on and so forth. Attacking is a key part of Twin Suns, and you'll typically need to inflict base damage on your opponents in order to win. You'll need a ready unit, and then a target. This can either be another unit in any of your opponent's matching zones, so ground on ground, space on space, unless otherwise specified. Or it can be your opponent's base, provided there's nothing stopping you from hitting it, like a sentinel. If that is all good, well, you first resolve any on-attack triggers that your unit has, such as this Valiant Assault Ship's on attack. If the defending player controls more resources than you, this unit gets +2/+0 for the attack. If you're attacking another unit, that unit will also deal damage back to your attacking unit equal to its power plus any modifiers. If your attacking unit survives, any when this unit completes an attack triggers will also then resolve. An important thing to remember is that unless otherwise stated, any unit that's health reaches 0 at any point is immediately defeated by going into the discard pile, at which point you'll resolve any when defeated abilities too. Attacking can be quite complex, what with the amount of variation of effects, triggers, modifiers, and all that can be in play, so talk it out with your table and just make sure that you're all happy with the resolution. Actions can be equally complex, but the most common types are leader actions and unit actions. For example, most leaders have text like Chewbacca's here, which might say, action, play a unit that costs 3 or less from your hand and it gains Sentinel for this phase. So rather than just playing a card, I could use that action, exhaust Chewbacca because that's the cost associated with it, and then play a card like Tech and say, well, I've played a 3-cost unit and now it's a Sentinel for this phase. Usually pretty straightforward. Read the card, it explains everything. It's worth noting you can actually use any action as many times as you like in the game, so long as you're able to pay its cost and the action is available to you, with the exception of epic actions, which can only be used once per game. And these are usually game-changing effects like deploying a leader or using a rare basis ability like Energy Conversion Lab. So make sure that you don't do it more than once. Maybe use, I don't know, a little extra token just to remind yourself that that's done now, can't do it again. Speaking of deploying your leader, well, sometimes that can have effects associated with them, such as on Yoda. Whenever he deploys, you can actually reveal your top card and kill something. Hey, it's a Yoda. Weird. But always check the rules text inside the box, because Boba Fett, for example, doesn't do anything when I deploy him. It's also worth noting that deploying is not the same as playing, because you've done it for free and the unit has come in ready. So if you're ever trying to see if a when played effect triggers on someone else, or when you play trigger resolves, it wouldn't for deploying a leader. Might sound confusing, but in general, that's deployed, not played. Those are the most confusing bits, but the last action you can take is to take an available token. Now remember, there are actually 3 tokens in Twin Suns: Initiative, the Plan, and Blast. The Initiative token dictates which player is going to start play on the next action phase. The Blast token deals 1 damage to every other player's base, and the Plan token allows you to draw the top card of your deck and then place a card from your hand on the bottom. It can actually be the same card that you just drew if you want, but totally up to you. You don't even have to reveal it to other players. Just a nice way to search your deck a little bit. Once someone's taken a token during the action phase, it can't actually be taken by any other player until the next action phase, so plan accordingly. But this also means that in a 3-player game, each token will be taken. But in a 4-player game, or even higher than that, there will always be at least 1 player that doesn't need to take a token, because there's none left. If a player takes a token, they are also indicating to a group that they are passing for the remainder of the phase, so no sneaky extra actions once you've taken one of them, okay? Your table will be mad at you, and you deserve it. Once all the tokens have been taken and then the final player passes, the action phase ends and players move into the regroup phase. And this works just the same as it does in other Star Wars Unlimited formats. You will draw 2 cards, choose if you would like to resource one of them. Yeah, that can go. And then you will ready all of your available resources or units. Unless, of course, someone played a card like No Good to Me Dead on one of your units, in which case that has to stay exhausted. But usually you're good to go. That's the general run of play, and you just keep repeating that process of resource phase, resource phase, action phase until the game ends. But how does it end? Well, in Twin Suns, unlike other multiplayer formats, the game doesn't actually end when 1 player dies, nor is it a last player standing format at all. The win condition in Twin Suns is to be the player with the most remaining base health at the end of the action phase in which the first player is defeated, which I know sounds like a real mouthful and very confusing, but let me explain. Once a player's health is reduced to 0, they are immediately defeated and we enter the end game. That player's cards are removed from play, and the player that did defeat them immediately heals their base for 5 base health. And this is honestly a super powerful swing of health that usually puts players in a great position. However, the game doesn't just stop at that point, because players will continue to play out the game until the end of that very same phase. So you could still make attacks, take any tokens, use actions, however you please, which makes it an extremely tactical fight for the finish. Funnily enough, it also means that it is entirely possible for a player to be eliminated during the resource phase via something like a delayed effect or drawing from an empty deck, which deals 3 base damage per card that you are unable to draw. In that case, you don't even move to the action phase because it happened in the resource phase. Simple. If you are still in an action phase though, you can still defeat other players to gain that extra 5 base health healing. So while you may think it's best to attack the player that just healed, perhaps you're actually better off eliminating the other weaker players to try and give yourself the best chance of toppling someone else later on. Once all actions have been taken and everyone has passed or been defeated, the player with the most remaining health wins. And in the event that more than one player shares the same remaining health total, all of those players win too. So you can actually have a 3-way draw, which is maybe a bit harsh for the only player that lost, but that's the game. One final thing to consider. Twin Suns is a casual format, which means that if you and your pod don't like the sound of a rule, just change it. You can tweak it to your heart's content and make it fun, interesting, or challenging to suit your group's needs. The main thing I'd recommend though is to make sure that everyone is in agreement with the rules that you make up before you start the game. Best to avoid any tears after all, because that's just awkward. So it sounds like a lot, but honestly Twin Suns is probably my favourite way of playing Star Wars Unlimited. If you like this video, leave it a like. Make sure you subscribe if you want to check out some full games or deck building tips, because we're going to have them on our channel. And, as always, take the blast. This one is the best one. Bye!